Here I'm going to be using Microset. It's a decal setting solution to help it stay flat down on the surface, a bit like a glue. But before I actually place down the decal and put down that Microset, the model has been treated with a gloss varnish coat. It's to do two things. One, to protect the model for subsequent effects like streaking and that sort of thing. And secondly, a gloss varnish will enable the decal to sit down much flatter than if I was to apply it on a matte surface. While soaking part of that panel with the Microset, I'm able to manipulate the decal on the wet surface. The decal is able to slide and move around on the surface of the model pretty freely because of that Microset solution there. As you can see, me pushing it up and down with the paintbrush. But as the Microset starts to evaporate and dry on the surface of the model, the decal will pretty much set in place. Here I'm using a very soft bristle flat brush to really flatten it down to the surface. You can do this with a cotton bud as well, but on flat surfaces I prefer to use a soft bristle paintbrush. Please note guys, don't use your tank brush from GW, those bristles are too rough and it'll probably tear the decal. It can be hard sometimes finding the centre of a panel, making your decal look lopsided or uneven. What I try to do is look for visual cues on the model to help me centre the decal. Here I'm using the centre column of the seating area, looking at that circular notch, which is enabling me to place the decal down in the centre nice and easily. I have mixed two Vallejo Model Air metallic colours together to form a tone similar to that of Games Workshop's Bolt Gun Metal. As you can see, the Vallejo Model Air metallics are fantastic. They give one coat coverage over pretty much any colour, and they also go down super smooth and thin. Here I'm using Bloodstained Mud. It's a fantastic colour to create some chipping effects. I'm using the tried and trusted technique of sponge chipping guys, and please don't knock it, it can work out really well. It's always a good idea to experiment with a sponge before actually dabbing it on the model, to be honest guys. By taking off tiny little pieces of the sponge and varying the amount of paint that's on the sponge, and also stippling it off on some kitchen roll, will differ the effects and the pattern of the chips on the model, which will lend itself to a more organic look. As I place down the sponge, you can see I very lightly feather it onto the model rather than pressing it in. It enables me to control more accurately where I want the chips. The fine speckled chips you can see are achieved by removing pretty much all of the paint from the sponge on some kitchen roll, and the larger paint chips is when the sponge is a little more wetter and I just ever so slightly dab it on the surface. Here I've sped up the footage for you guys just to show you the accumulation of the effect. I realise it's not 100% authentic and accuracy to the fluff of the 40k universe using rust on vehicles, but the reason I'm doing this is I think it looks really cool in it. It's going to add some really nice effects over the decal, especially when I overpaint it, which we'll get to a little later on in the video. So I apply the rust, but I do it very sparingly. I don't want to go over the top on this tank. I mean, after all guys, it's not Death Guard. Using the light rust, you can see here how easy it is to actually subtly add the rusting effects, but not making it too obvious, just by adding water to the brush and feathering those streaks out from where I place them. I want to do some overpainting of some decals, and brush control is very important to achieve that. Here I'm actually showing you how I go about doing that. It's very crucially important that I get a very nice sharp tip to the bristles of my brush. I do that, as you seen a moment ago, by rolling the bristles of the brush in a circular motion. If I just load my paintbrush up with loads of paint and I just hit the model, as you see on the paper here, I'm going to get very thick uneven lines, and it's going to be very hard to control what I do with the brush. Here I've removed a little bit of the paint, I've rolled the bristles into a nice sharp point, and you'll see I'll be able to get a much thinner, more accurate and controlled line. So I think this is a top tip, especially if you're new to the hobby. Don't dip your paintbrush in a palette and hit it straight on the model, especially if you're trying to actually paint a human face or any type of detail. Controlling the amount of paint on your paintbrush and rolling the bristles of the brush will help you achieve better results on your model. We're applying hard edge highlights to the larger chips on the model to make that really nice 3D effect, which enables the chips to really pop and look a bit more realistic. It's important to note whichever angle you start painting those paint chips, you have to follow it along with all of them. So here you can see that the bottom left hand side are getting hit with the hard edge highlight of the Minitaire Skull White. Remember I was showing you a moment ago the brush control? Well, this is where it really comes in handy. Overpainting decals can look absolutely fantastic. This is the end result of actually overpainting the decal. As you can see, it really pops and stands out now and it adds a really cool effect. Also, I applied it on the Aquila on the other side of the Rhino. Here I'm adding hard edge highlights. It's a really cool effect and it can really make the panels of your tank pop. The trick to this technique is to not actually paint using the very tip of the brush or the toe of the brush. That will lead to thick, uneven lines and it will really spoil the overall look we're going for. I actually use a side of the bristles and I very slightly feather them on the angle that I'm actually trying to create the line. This is what the hard edge highlighting looks like on all the sections of the inside of the Rhino. And as you can see, the panels have really started to pop and come to life now. Here I'm using Vallejo's gloss varnish to add a very simple but yet effective technique. I'm making those matte panels look gloss and shiny as if they're real glass. In the next part we'll be building the tank and starting to paint the outside. So thanks for watching guys, don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.